Okay, so this is the second video I'm going to do on this. Yeah, I'm sorry that the first one was deleted. I don't know what happened there. So this is Nomad. Nomad, I know a few of you have said, oh, it's a bit confusing to get into. I'm a bit overwhelmed with the UI. I want to kind of reiterate that what we're looking at here with the UI isn't actually that complex. Because it's an app, it has to be very, very, screen economic with what we actually see on screen. What's going to really, really help people is literally just going through the UI and just looking at what each one of these drop down menus says. Now, yours might look a little bit different from mine purely because I've gone through and changed some of the settings, and some of the settings might literally just be, swapping, if I come into here, into this little drop down menu up here, top left. On me, it's top left anyway. I've got an option here to like mirror the top bar, so I can actually mirror that top bar like that. I can mirror the sidebars, as you can see there, and I can mirror the bottom bar, which is the bottom left here. You can see I can mirror that as well. And then you got color options and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to mess with mine because I like my colors I've got in here. So let's have a talk what's going on. So up at the top left, again, for me, my top left, I've got basically my app options that are controlling app-based things, a couple of tool-based things. So up at the very, very top left, you've got this little, the Nomad icon. You click that, it'll take you to this. So it's you go to the Instagram, all that kind of shit. Yeah, cool. So this little drop down here, like you saw there, is basically options. There's some really good options in here I'm going to go over in a sec. But in here, we've got some options mainly about the way that stuff looks. And, you can have a look through there. Up here, it says add shortcuts. And these shortcuts, it says they're bottom. Well, that relates to what's at the bottom there. So I can add and take away things from that area, which I like. In fact, I'm going to turn this inspector off because I don't actually know what that inspector does. And you can add and take away that kind of stuff. And here you can see toolboxes coloured, all this kind of stuff. Very, very good. So that's inside there. Now, a really important one is gesture. So inside this drop down, you got gesture. So by default, you can sculpt with your finger, and your fingers have a lot more kind of functionality. And I'm not a mad fan of that. I don't like it at all. I would much rather have my stylus be the only thing that actually does any sculpting. So what I've done here is literally start turning on and off things I do and do not want things to do. So camera, well, I got my fingers, I got my stylus, and you can even have mice that you can kind of hook up to the iPad. But my sculpting is only by stylus. My gizmo, which we're going to look at in a little bit, is only by stylus, and my material picker is only by stylus. Cool, and everything else is by fingers and stuff. And again, there's some little options in here. Even though I've been using this for years, I've never really gone through every last little option. I could probably go through and make my life a lot easier, but to be honest, I like how I've got it set up. And you got bindings if you have a keyboard and some debug stuff there, that's fine. This one little cog here, so this is a little bit more about, making it look the way you want it to, some color settings, the way that certain things work. Again, a lot of this kind of stuff, it's not going to affect the way you sculpt. It's just going to affect the way you kind of interact with the app or the way you see things on screen. So we don't have to worry about that too much. Layers. Now, we're going to learn about layers later on in the year when we're doing ZBrush stuff. But layers in ZBrush and in Nomad work very similar. They're not like Photoshop layers or anything like that, where it's, we're sculpting on top of each of that kind of stuff. This is more like, we'll learn about them as the year goes on. So layers work similar to ZBrush layers. Now this one I've never really messed with too much, but this essentially is just how we see and interact with the specific subtool. We'll learn about subtools in a little bit, what we're looking at. So I don't really mess with this tab here too much. This is your symmetry tab, so this is how you can symmetrize stuff or turn on, turn off symmetry inside the world. Again, just have a play and see what's going on in here. This is if we're actually painting on the surface. You can do poly painting in here. So this is the menu for that. And this is your brush menu. So this menu you might be using a lot of because this is all about, the way that is your brush size to the actual screen itself, or is your brush dependent on the size of the object? So if I make a nice big brush here, as you can see, but I move closer, you see how my brush kind of stays the same size relative to the surface. But if I turn it off, it's relative to the screen, which I do not like personally. I like having it relative to the object. So I like the constant 3D. And again, stroke and roll, all this kind of stuff. These are, again, just things to play with. Alphas, so we can have alphas, basically the shape of the brush. Fall off, the way the brush works. Don't worry about this too much, because only worry about these kind of things, these three, when you've been using the app a lot more. Just get used to using the basic tools at first. Filter has got some cool stuff in. We're going to talk about some stuff inside here later on. The main one is, at the very top where it says, well, currently I've got a clay brush. So it says filter clay. It says front-facing vertex only. This guy right here. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah, again, these are kind of like just personalized settings. And then here at the very end, this little like icon here, this is whatever brush I've got here might have additional settings. So currently this clay has no additional settings. Smooth has this. Flatten has this. Crease has this. So it's like brush dependent, brush specific settings. So that's that little menu there. Over on the right hand side here, we've got the little camera. And this is basically all about the way that we see things visually inside the world. Now, again, I've been using this for years, and I've still not gone through every last little bit of this app, because I've not really felt like I needed to. But we can change perspective and orthographic. So perspective means there is perspective involved in the surface. You can change the perspective of a thing, which is fine. We're going to learn all about that. Orthographic is currently what I'm making these guys in. Orthographic just means there's no perspective. So I can change in between those two is that. Rotation. Now this one is important, and I'm just going to touch on navigation while I do this. So if I change this to turntable, which I believe is a default, turntable just allows me to actually rotate round. And as I'm rotating, I'm doing this by my finger. Like I said, I changed my inputs. I forgot what my inputs are. There you go, my gestures. I've changed my input so I'm moving the camera on my finger when I'm not actually sculpting with it. So I'm fine with doing that. So yeah, what turntable does, it allows me to rotate around, zoom in. But what I can't do is I can't rotate. Some people might prefer it like that, where you can actually rotate it up and down. But what I like is if I change rotation to trackball, then I can actually flip it upside down and move it around. And I like this. I like being able to use my fingers to move it around. Now, just talking about navigation there, because I've got my gesture settings set the way they are, so my finger is only about either picking an object, so I'm tapping on the objects there to pick them, or if I double tap in grey space being basically the area around it, I can frame. Like that. I can just frame the objects. But if I just use two fingers and pinch in and out, I can zoom in and out. So that's me pinching, as you would do on a phone. But if I kind of rotate like that, so I'm using two fingers to rotate, I can flip it upside down. So as you can see, very, very quickly, I'm able to move around, zoom, rotate, boom. I like that. So that's rotation trackable. And then you can reset view and all this kind of stuff. Again, change these settings as you want to. I've left a lot of these kind of by default. Background. So I've changed my background to a slightly warmer colour. Just because, if I'm working on this a lot, I want to have something that's a little bit better for my eyes and all that kind of stuff. You can change the background to be, whatever. There's all these things, gradients. You can add reference images in as well. So I can actually bring a reference image from my camera roll and have it up there so I can have something I can, use. As you can see here in this project, I kind of want to get this, very stylized, like redneck looking geezer. So I've been using that. And that's in that little image there. And obviously you've got settings for that image as you want. Here, my quality, I don't really mess with this too much. You can turn post-processing off, post-processing on, essentially making more kind of... Oh, that one's really struggling. There you go. I can turn depth of field on. I don't generally touch these unless I'm doing rendering, which I don't generally do inside Nomad. So I don't generally tend to touch these. This little star shape here, I don't know why it's like a sun star thing, but this allows me to change the way I'm seeing my actual surface. So I can go to PBR, or physical based rendering, which is basically pulling lighting off this image, as you can see, and I can change the image to other stuff. And you can see if I change them, you get all these different kind of lighting conditions, which I can also... Oops, a daisy. There you go. I can change the exposure. I can change the rotation. So if you like working like that, work like that. I personally don't. I like using something called matte cap or material capture, which I've got a few. By default, you get a few different, you know, map cap materials, and you'll have this exact thing inside ZBrush as well. This exists inside ZBrush, and I've got a few that I really like. This is one that I really like. What's this called? Inco Mud. I really like this one. I really like Naki Blue. I like this one. It's called Hazardous Skin. So you'll find your own little matte caps all, working. Unlit just basically gives you a silhouette, which can be useful. You got stuff. This is basically just how we actually see the mesh. I'm actually going to change that back to that. Yeah, I like that a lot. That's cool. This little stack of... Oh, sorry, we're moving on to this one. There we go. So materials. So this is the way we actually see the mesh. So in here, we've got stuff like all this subsurface. Again, have a play. Have a play with these kind of... these type menus up at the top. Underneath, you've got all this inverse coloring. You've got smooth shading. I do not like having smooth shading turned on. I like working with this rougher surface. Because, again, I'm not precious with stuff, as I keep saying. I work with this noise naturally. I don't want to cover anything up because there's every chance that if you auto smooth and have smoothing turned on, you might, miss something. All this kind of stuff. These are all just, again, some sort of visual setting. So these little this little like stack of bricks here, this is where it can get a bit fun and maybe sometimes a little bit complicated, but again, this isn't very complicated. So this little stack of bricks, again, inside ZBrush, you're going to have the exact same the exact same functions. So this multi-resolution here is basically allowing me, I've subdivided this surface I've been working on to give myself more kind of mesh, to give myself more detail. So at the very bottom, if I turn a wireframe on, you can see that this mesh is quite dense. If I zoom in, you're going to see that, that's very, very dense. But then if I lower that multi-resolution down again, and then down to the lowest, so you can see here I've got multiple resolutions I can work on. Now this isn't the only way I work. Generally, actually, I don't actually generally work with multi-resolution that much. In this one, I just wanted to use it because I wanted to have the the ability to go up and down the resolutions. Voxel, we're going to have a look at Voxel later on, but Voxel is Nomad's version of something called Dynamesh, and Dynamesh is incredible. It's one of the most useful tools you'll ever have in sculpting, and we're going to use it a lot. It's going to be one of our main kind of tools we're going to use, but we'll have a look at that later on, like I said. Dynotopo, we're going to have a look at that later on as well. So these are just ways of working, and again, you'll find your own ways of working. This little misc, I always see this like a little bit of a diamond shape, not a diamond like this, but kind of like a piece of geode or whatever. This is other stuff. I've really only ever used a decimation at the top. I've never used the UV unwrapping here because I just don't trust it and all this kind of stuff. I've never really used any of this stuff inside here. But again, explore, see what it does. And that's that little drop-down menu there. Now you will notice when I change function, so if I go to Voxel and I click off it, you see that the Voxel icon is still present. If I go to MISC, the MISC icon is now still present. So it's always going to show you the kind of function you're working on. So I'll go to multi-res so I can see it. Okay, so now this little like group of 3 boxes, this is, so inside ZBrush, we call these subtools. A subtool is basically an object on its own. Very similar to, Maya, we're going to be working on multiple objects, but because of the ways that sculpting softwares work, you can be very gestural, you can move around a lot, you can all do all this stuff. And if I'm always interacting, if I'm sculpting this geezer, so yeah, I'm sculpting, and I'm moving the mouse over to the other guy, but you see how it's not actually sculpting on top of him? It's not actually affecting his mesh. That's because he's on a different subtool. So sculpt it, and I drag over here, and it's not actually affecting it. Because they're different subtools, I actually have to select that guy to then start sculpting on him. Okay, so subtools are basically objects in the scene. And in Nomad, this is how we interact with them. And we can activate them, turn them on and off, have them selected, we can all do all the stuff here. And there are other things. You'll see there's little drop down menus. Oh, not drop down, but there's other stuff like delete, link, join, separate. These are all essentially versions of what we're going to be dealing with inside ZBrush. But for the first short while, we're not really going to be dealing with multiple subtools. We're just going to be dealing with one subtool to keep it easy. And then you've got here, so this is basically, okay, yeah, you can see what's going on. Save, save as, rename, open, add to scene, delete, new, autosave, import, export, so render, so that's pretty self-explanatory. And on the very far right here, we've got this. So what this is basically the brush menu. So I don't, like, by default, I believe it was like this, like a little square here. Now, I'm not a mad fan of that. I prefer a big long line like this. So it's just, again, it's more screen economy. But if I just tap that very top right icon, again, it's top right for me because possibly, I can't remember what the default is, but possibly this top right menu might be over to the left-hand side. Who knows? Again, I'm not going to reset my settings on Nomad just to show you. But yeah, this is all the tools. And these are all the tools, like I said. You know, cool. Now, one really good thing about the brush menu on the right here is it didn't come like this. The arrangement doesn't come like this by default. I've actually arranged these so that my least used are at the very, very bottom, and basically my most commonest are at the top. So that's really easy to do as well. If I just click and hold on something, I can click and I can drag it around. So I could move this clay brush all the way up to the top, or I could move it down. It's up to me. Wherever I move, there you go. Boom. There you go. I like it there. And if you click and hold it as well, or no, you click it, you double tap it. You know, we've got all these brush menu settings up here. So if I wanted to make a clay brush, so I double tap it, and I want to make a clone of that, I can rename it. I can make a new clone, and I can have basically two different types of the same brush. One could be very noisy and toothy that I'm using for very early sketching stuff. Another one, I might kind of change the setting so it's acting more like a soft mask making brush. So, you know, you've got a load of customizability on here. So the left-hand side here, so I do this on the because I'm right-handed. I do this a lot with my finger and stuff. So I've got at the very top here, I got symmetry. So this allows me to actually have symmetry turned on or symmetry turned off. You know, symmetry. This little guy here, well, that's basically the size of the brush. So I can do that. This guy here is the intensity, so I can I can even push intensity further as well. So I can override, you know, overload intensity. So I can go really strong like that. I can make a really strong brush by overloading the intensity, or I can make it very subtle by dragging it right down. You can't go negative, but you can go all the way down to like 4%. And what I'm doing there, it's so subtle. You can maybe see that there. I'm just gently adding it. And that's all. You got your size and you got intensity. And like I said, I use my left hand to do that. Underneath there, so this is sub. Sub is dependent on the brush you're using. So, well, I say brush dependent. The brush that I'm using, clay, either is a mask making brush like this, where I'm bringing geometry off the surface, I'm making more mass, or if I press sub, it's taking it away, it's pushing it in. So that's what that does. But like I said, this is brush dependent. So if I go to flatten, it's going to be different. So flatten flattens. If I click fill, it'll fill. You know, we're going to look at the move brush later on because that is a fun one of, you know, the fun version that we got here. Underneath there, we've got smooth. Now, I have got a smooth brush already there. But if I'm with the clay, I can just tap smooth here. So I can go mask make. Oh, there you go. I can go mask. You know, add a bunch of masks there, and I can click smooth, and I can try and smooth it back a little bit. Now, I will pre-warn you, smoothing is not a way to get away from bad geometry. Remember that smoothing in all these softwares it can be quite damaging if you're not careful. You know, you've got to learn to work with some of the more like gnarlier detail. So if I've got like this, you can see the kind of pixelization of the surface there. If I've got that, I'm just gonna have to work with it. I'm not gonna come in there and use a smooth tool to take it away, because you see what happens? You lose all that detail, and I don't want that at all. So that's smooth. Mask creates a mask, so it means I can actually create a surface area there that I can actually then work around. You can see how that mask in the middle is not being touched. That's what mask does. And when I click mask, you do get an option box at the very top with like function. So I could put a mask there and I can invert it. So now I'm only going to work for the inside there. So you see how the area around it is not being worked. The area inside that mask is being worked. Hide is hide. Gizmo, right. So let me unmask. I'll click that. I go to clear all. Gizmo, right. Gizmo is literally just ways of moving stuff around, rotating it, all that kind of shit. So that's what Gizmo does. And then you've got at the very bottom, you've got a few kind of like little settings. So you got like an alpha brush setting. I don't generally do too much of this because I'm not going to try and do the entire project in Nomad. So when it comes to alphas, I basically just let it do what the standard brush does. Not to say we can't do that. You know, we can make our own alphas, bring them in, import them in, or we can look through what we've got in here, which, to be honest, a lot of these for me are very, very useless. Why would I need why would I need all these kind of weird alphas? You know, maybe I might want something like that, possibly, but, you know, for me, I don't generally mess with the alphas too much. So that's that left-hand side menu. The very bottom menu obviously ties into what we had up here. So in my interface, I can add and take away elements from the bottom just by doing this, as you can see. But here is, you know, it's whatever's up there. So my settings, what have I got in here? I've got undo and redo. I've got basically a history of brush motions. I've got solo, which obviously, because I've got more than one mesh in the scene, we'll solo off a mesh. I've got X-ray. Now, yeah, you can see what X-ray does there. Now I've got a voxel, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. Grid brings up a grid. And then wireframe brings up a wireframe. Nice and easy. And again, you'll find the settings that you like for these and all that kind of stuff. Now, that's the UI. Oh, sorry, the UI again here. So at the very, very top right, we got this cube. Now, this cube just basically shows you what direction you're looking at. And you can tap it to force it to go to certain angles and stuff. But I don't generally use this to navigate. I use my fingers to navigate, as like I said. I just use that as a reference. The little house icon will put you back into basically, you know, the neutral standard camera position. This little frame here, I don't generally use this because I double tap my finger. So if I double tap in gray space, it focuses. If I double tap in gray space again, it focuses. So I focus into my selected subtool like this, or I can focus into the scene, so everything inside the scene. Nice, good, nice, good. And the last one is this little padlock will actually stop you from rotating. You can still zoom in and out, but what it won't allow you to do is actually rotate round. So I'm trying to rotate, but it won't allow me. And that's what that little padlock does. I don't generally use that because I don't see the point of it. I'm sure there's some, maybe for, I don't know, for projection mapping or something. I don't know. But that is the UI right there. So I said there was some really cool functions we got in here, which I'm going to show you. So what I'm going to do is actually start off a new mesh, and I'm not going to show you how to sculpt a head, but I'm going to sculpt a basic head and kind of talk through some of the functions like the voxel and stuff like that as I'm doing it. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go to new. I'm going to go, yes, that's fine, that's fine. I'm going to turn off that auto smoothing. So I'm going to go to that little option there, turn off auto smoothing, because I don't want that. And then I'm also going to go into this little multi-res thing. And I'm going to take that down to the lowest resolution, because again, I don't want any stuff there. So if I turn on my wireframe, it's at the bottom, turn on the wireframe, there we go. So you can see that's what my mesh looks like. I know I'm looking from the front, because at the top right there, I can see the little fronts facing towards me. And what I'm going to do is basically make a face. So I'm going to get my move brush. I'm going to make it a bit big. And I'm just going to start to drag down a chin, pull in the sides of the head. So it kind of looks like a head from the front. I'm going to turn around to the side, and then I'm going to bring out the chin a little bit. I'm going to push up the jaw, push up the back of the neck, pull up the back of the skull, trying to get that, that cranium, my frontal, my parietal, my occipital kind of shapes in there. That's fine. Pull in a little bit, look from the top. How's it look? That looks fine. That's good. That's fine. Okay, cool. So I want to have a neck as well. I want to bring out a neck at this stage because I'm going to do everything from one mesh. Now, while I'm here, I might as well show you some of the functions I was talking about. So with my move brush, that I've got selected on the right-hand side here, on the left-hand side, I was saying that all these brushes have kind of like this little alternate version of them. Obviously, the clay build-up has a sub version. The move version has a normal version. Now, let's see what it actually does. So I'm going to get my brush. I'm going to look from kind of 3/4 there. I'm just going to click and drag to the side like that. So what I'm doing is called camera left, or camera-based movement. So I'm clicking and dragging to the right-hand side there, which means it clicks and it drags it parallel to the camera. Okay, makes sense. Now, if I turn normal on, what it does is it takes basically the average vertex facing position inside that circle there, and it's going to move it in that direction. So instead of this going like directly right, what it's going to do is come towards me if I do that. See what I mean? Which is cool. So that's what normal turns on. It's not normal as in it's going to work normal. It's normal as in a vertex position, a polygon facing position. So what I'm going to do is turn on normal, go underneath, and I'm just going to go roughly where the neck's going to be. I don't need to be perfect. I'm just going to drag down like that. Boom. I'm dragging down the neck. Turn off normal, and I'm just going to go and use my move tool just to kind of, bash in the neck. And you can see there, I've purposely left a wireframe on, so you can see that the polygons are really starting to get very messy at the bottom of the neck there. That's fine. I've purposely done that. I've purposely left that on. So there you go. So, there's some sort of neck in there. Let's have a look from the front. Well, it's a bit thin in it, so let's just bring out the neck a little bit. Oh, like that. So it's a bit messy, but again, I don't care too much. Bring the neck a little bit. That's all good. That's all fine. Okay, so we've got something going on. That's fine. But as you can see, if I wanted to work further into that neck, it'd be very difficult because the neck is now, all the polygons are very big. So if I try and get a sculpting brush, I've not really got much sculpting ability there. That's what this voxel does. So I've got voxel on my bottom left toolbar there. But if I go up here, where it says multi-res normally, I go to voxel. So in this menu, what I'm going to do is I've got this resolution. So if I move this up and down, you're going to see kind of a checkerboard coming. And this is like basically the density of the resolution. So I'm gonna go to I'm gonna make it nice and big. So I'm gonna do that, for instance. So this is now 18 resolution. So if I click remesh or voxel, yeah. There you go. So now basically what it does is it remeshes, it redistributes polygons over the surface in as average a way as it can, so we can keep working. So you know what, this really isn't a bad resolution because I've not got the detail to add anything. So all I can do here is literally just think about the silhouette, the structure of the object. I've not got the ability to think about detail. But if I raise that resolution to something like, I don't know, about 80, let's say, like that, I click remesh again. So what you're going to see is, yeah, there you go. So we've kept pretty much the same density of the polygons over the surface, but where we've got these very big polygons at the bottom down here, a new kind of surface gets created that gives you a much better, surface area. It's not pretty right now, but if I start going in there with my sculpting tools, I can start to actually sculpting here now, which is great. Turn on sub. I can start to just chisel away some of that information, define a jawline, push back the forehead, move around as I'm sculpting. Best sculpt I've ever done in my life. Boopity boop. Go in, kind of like trying to chisel out some of the orbital ridge right there. Push in the eye sockets, pull pulling some of that there. Cheekbones, that's all good. Cheekbones right there. That's grand. So you can see that, you know, if I was to go back in there and do a revoxel again using the exact same, we're going to do a save in a second, so I'm just going to say like, no, yep, no, I don't want to save. If I do another voxel now, you're going to see that it doesn't really fix the surface. But what it does is just redistributes that polygons over the surface again. There you go. And then I can go back in there with my move tool and start to push and pull stuff around. Maybe even go to smooth and just smooth out some of that information that is getting a little bit noisy. There we go. You know, so I've kind of got something on the go. It's something starting to take shape. Now, one of the last things I'm going to show you, because obviously this isn't a how to sculpt the head video. I'm just literally showing you some stuff we can do in UI. And I'll show you some stuff that I have actually done in Nomad. What I'm going to do is use a mask tool on the last things there, because maybe I want to drag out some ears. You know, we've got eye sockets, so we know roughly where the eyes are going to go. We've got a neck in there. We brought a neck out. That's great. But what I can do now is mask off an area where I want the ears to come out of. So, and I'm not going to mask off the shape of the ear like that. That's what I'm not going to do. I'm going to mask off a kind of like a hole where the ear is going to go, like that. I'm going to invert. And if I tap inside the dark area, it actually softens it. So I can tap, 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 soft. Using two fingers there just to go back. Oh, actually, I don't think I said that before, actually. Undo and redo. Sorry, I completely forgot about that one. So undoing, if I just two-finger tap on the screen, that's undo. If I three-finger tap on the screen, that's redo. Dead easy. So yeah, I've got that mask in there. I can invert it. And then if I just use the move tool, normal, and drag out that, boom. So I'm starting to drag out some ear information. And while that's still masked, I'm going to turn off normal again, because I only want normal because I wanted to drag it basically directly out from the side of the head. And now with that, I can then start to just, you know, make a really nasty ear shape. It does not have to be perfect. It will not be perfect at the beginning. There you go, boom, there you go. Ear shape. He's got some wing nuts for now. I'll clear that mask like that. So I'm clicking mask and then clicking clear all. And what I'm going to do is up the voxels a bit more. So I'm going to increase my voxels to about 100. Remesh. And then you see that all that really unsculptable surface in the ear becomes a sculptable surface. So now I can start to, you know, move around, all that good stuff, which is really, really good. The last thing I'm going to show you is just inside here, I did talk about at the beginning inside the brush filters. So in the filter, in the brush menu, which by default would be the stroke. Nice little brush icon here if I go to filter. So I might be sculpting inside the ear there. But what might happen, as you can see there, because that area is so thin, my brush is also interacting with the back of the ear, which is what I do not want that to happen. So what I can do is actually come in here and I can turn on something called front facing vertex only, which means it'll only affect the polygons that are facing the camera. So now you can see there, nothing's affecting as I sculpt in there. It's not affecting the back of the ear. And all these functions I'm talking about are all prevalent and they're all in ZBrush. So it's nice and easy. So, you know, that's an overview of Nomad and how to do basic tools. A lot of it is you just got to practice and get into it and, you know, get used to using it. So let's have a look at what you can actually do. So if I go to open, I've not got all my projects in here. There are a few projects which have lost their connection to Nomad. I'd have to kind of like, you know, reopen them and stuff. But, well, you saw my kind of rednecks I was talking about before. So, you know, not bad at all. Definitely not like ZBrush quality. You know, you're not going to be able to get the ZBrush quality, but still, I like them. They're very, very good. I'll show you something that I didn't do, but I downloaded it as a project just to see what Nomad could handle. And this is a really good example of stuff you can do. So, open, please. So it takes a bit of time to open. There we go. So this is a project someone else has done, and it just shows what you can do. So they've done all, and I've got the videos and stuff to prove it. They've made this whole thing inside Nomad. Hard surface, lighting, and also, you know, like lighting, you see the little glowing orbs, but also lights around the scene that light illuminate it. It's hard surface, it's posed, it's got post-processing to make it all look all sexy and stuff. There you go. So you got some post-processing there. I can turn some of this off, you know. So that's something that someone else has done. It's not game ready, obviously. If I turn the wireframe on, it's disgustingly dense, and it's not. It doesn't run great. It does not run great. But this is just a flex. You know, if someone's done it as a flex. As I keep saying, I use Nomad as like a sketching tool to begin a project. So I'll just go through a few things I've got. Like, okay, what's Viking base OBJ? Okay, so yeah, I had a Viking base OBJ. I was doing something with this a while ago. What we got here? I've got what's this mushroom guy? So this mushroom guy was the beginning of a project. I ended up finishing this inside ZBrush, but I basically made this guy on the left for a friend. I've got a torso here that started off as Sasha, but it turned into my Viking lady. But I know I've got the torsos that I've kind of done here. I've got a just general head practice sculpting, you know, just sculpted a head, poops and gigs. I've got a monkey here, so I was doing like a little monkey project, little sketchy thing. That's great, you know, bit of fun. I've got like this Oni Girl character, which I've got multiple subtools for, I believe. Yeah, I got all these subtools for it. So I've got horns and hair and different heads. Actually, I think I've got multiple heads in here. So yeah, I've got horns, eyebrows, that head, teeth. Okay, that makes sense because she's got teeth there. There you go. So it's a couple of different types of heads, some eyes, ears. So you boom. No, I did most of this inside Nomad, and then I've taken it out further. This is now in ZBrush, getting worked on. I've got my trees, so I've got my different oak. Again, they started in ZBrush. Sorry, they started in Nomad and got taken into ZBrush. But all this as well, so I've got a lot of like very kind of organic shapes here. This is using the tubes function here, which I'm not going to show you here because it'll take a while to show you. But, you know, these all were made using this tube function here because obviously I'm not dealing with human anatomy. So, yeah, this guy. Oh, well, there's a tube right there. I can kind of show you what a tube does. That's a tube. And I've made all this base model, and then with tubes and went through and started kind of making it all organic and fun, all that kind of stuff. I've got this head. Again, you know, there's a little bit of a head practice. And I showed this in class, but I've got the Baron project here. So I've got that Baron head I was showing in class. So let me just turn off smooth shading. I don't like it. There we go. So yeah, I've got the Baron project in there. I did start my alien guy in here. I've got videos of him being sculpted in Nomad, which I'm gonna link to the VLE. But you know, you'll see that you can do a lot inside Nomad, to a point. Like I said, Nomad is like Nomad is to ZBrush what Procreate is to Photoshop. Yes, you can sketch, you can make some nice stuff, but at the end of the day, what you're not going to be able to create in it is a production level piece. Same for Procreate. Procreate, it's all nice and good. You might be able to do a couple of production stuff, but generally, if you're doing anything that's actually technical or concept-y or photo bashing, you're never going to be able to do it. So, you know, in here we've got head, obviously. We've got my head sculpt. Plus, I've got some kind of base meshes for hair and beards and stuff. I've got body. I think, like I said, I've got some clothing in here. Yes, I've got all sorts of jibby jazz. Yes, I've got some torso stuff I was sculpting. So you can do a lot of really, really cool stuff inside Nomad. It's a great tool for sketching. You know, years ago, we were never... Well, actually, no, not that long ago. We weren't able to sketch on the go. We weren't able to sculpt wherever we wanted to. We always had to be locked to a system to do it. But now we have the ability to sketch, sculpt wherever we want to. We can take these quite a ways, you know. Like I said, I do some of my projects in here for maybe up to 50% of it, up until I need to start getting really, really good levels of detail. I start doing technical stuff. I'll do quite a lot of it in Nomad because I like it. But like I said, it is not a replacement for ZBrush. But that's Nomad. So it's really good. It's definitely worth an investment. There are things that I've not covered in here that are good to know about, like quad remesher, face grouping, like I said, the tubes, the trims, stamps, inserting meshes, lathing, measuring. There's tons of stuff we can do in it. You just got to explore it and have a play with it. And that is Nomad. So hopefully this video gets uploaded, and hopefully you can tell what I'm talking about with my ever voice losingness. But yeah, hopefully this works. It helps.